We are so full of grievance and animosity. We are so quick to abandon facts that we don't like. We have lost the ability to evaluate expertise and integrity and humility, the things that we ought to be assessing when we decide about who to trust, because something else dominates. Is that person part of my tribe?
Welcome, everyone, to this conversation with Francis Collins, whose latest book, The Road to Wisdom, has just been awarded the 2025 Book Prize by the International Society for Science and Religion. My name is Ron Cole-Turner, and on behalf of the International Society, it is my privilege to welcome you, Francis, to this conversation and to congratulate you on this award.
Ron,
I
it's
want to
very
be
kind of you. And again, it's great to have a chance to have this conversation with you. We go way back in various areas about genomics, and now we can have a different conversation.
Yes, indeed. And I should remind our listeners that you have served as the director of the National Institutes of Health a good long run from 2009 to 2021, serving under three presidents. And before assuming overall leadership of the NIH, you were the director of the National Human Genome Research Institute from 1993 to 2008. And of course, adding up all of that, we have a career of absolutely extraordinary public service, spanning parts of 4 decades. And then, even when you step down as NIH director in 2021, you continued to work in your own NIH lab until March of just this year, just 7 months ago. Now, as I understand it, that was a particularly difficult time for you. Even so, I'm wondering if you would take us back to that time of departure from the NIH lab. What was going through your mind at the time, and how have things turned out since?
Well, it was a very difficult time. My laboratory on the NIH campus in Bethesda, Maryland, had been continuously operating since 1993. I managed to keep a lab going all the way through the time of being the Genome Project leader and the NIH director. And that mattered a lot. I think to me, it anchored me in the reality of what's happening in science. You weren't just reading about it, you were doing it, and you were training the next generation. And it was a little exhausting sometimes trying to juggle all that, but it seemed like it was a really good thing. And so in early 2025, I'm still running a lab with 14 people. Half of them are young trainees, postbacks, graduate students, postdocs, working on two projects, one on adult onset diabetes, so-called type 2 diabetes, where we're really getting serious insights into the genetic factors that play out and what to do about that. And another on a very rare disease called progeria, which is a dramatic form of premature aging, which we have discovered the cause of. It's just one misspelled letter out of 3 billion in the human genome. And on the path towards applying this amazing new field of gene editing to potentially provide a cure, which we've now applied to the mouse model with amazing results, and are on the path towards a human clinical trial. But things got very complicated. After January 20th, if you were working in the NIH environment, you were basically told several things that were pretty hard to live with. You're not allowed to go to meetings, not allowed to speak in any kind of setting. Ordering of supplies suddenly became extremely difficult. And you were also told not to start any new projects. You're only allowed to work on things that you were already doing. That didn't sound like a good thing for what is supposed to be the most innovative scientific enterprise in the world. Figured that was just temporary. There's always a bit of a hiccup when a new administration comes to town, but it wasn't. And then people started getting fired for no reason. And my own lab began to suffer in that regard by losing people who were really critical parts of our team. It became untenable. And then I was made to feel extremely unwelcome and pretty much given the choice of being fired or retire quickly in order to make less of a to do about it. I elected the retirement option and managed to get my lab transferred to the care of another principal investigator so that they could keep going, and they have. But I must say, after 32 years of being at that institution, which I dearly love, and seeing all the amazing things that have been done there over more than 3 decades, that last Friday afternoon, walking out, never to return, with this being the means of exit, was pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah, thank you. That's painful for all of us to hear, and I'm sure very, very difficult for you to live through. In the book, you talk about how demanding science can be, even under the best of circumstances.
Yes.
And you also describe, though, as a sense of urgency that I think is rooted in hopefulness because of what you see as the potential medical benefits. And you describe that sense of hopefulness as driving forward the effort during the early days of the Human Genome Project, when you and I first met.
Yeah.
In the 1990s, and again, especially during the race to develop the COVID-19 vaccines in 2020. And I'm wondering, what was it like to be in the middle of it all? Were there moments when you felt, we're just not going to get there? Maybe these vaccines work. Medical science is not going to meet this challenge, no matter how hard we try.
Yeah. Oh, plenty of times. I start out the book talking about my very first effort as a scientist trying to do something in molecular biology, which was a spectacular failure. Because I wanted people to appreciate that that's the nature of science. There are a lot of tears that get shed in the laboratory because you get very personally committed to something that you think is going to be right, and you're going to add to knowledge and maybe help somebody. And then oftentimes your hypothesis is wrong, or your experiment was not designed right, or you just didn't understand it well enough. And disappointments are just so much part of the experience. But once in a while, when you discover something that only God knew before, and now you as a human are the first glimpse of that, that makes it like, okay, I will do this until the day I die, because it is so amazing to be getting a glimpse of God's mind. Yeah, there were plenty of times in my 40 years in this space. Going back to before I came to NIH, working at the University of Michigan, trying to find the cause of cystic fibrosis. That was an incredibly difficult search that many people thought was just foolhardy. It took us 5 years of so many blind alleys and really burning out an awful lot of people who just couldn't keep going after so many disappointments. But then, with a wonderful collaborator and determination, and some prayer, ultimately, there it was. Those 3 missing letters that is the main cause of this disease. And now here we are, some 35 years later, where people with that condition can start to plan for retirement, because that started the ball rolling on coming up with a therapy that works amazingly well. So it's worth it. I'm a physician. I have never really worked in my own lab on a problem that I didn't first meet in the clinic, and felt like, somebody should work on this. Okay, well, maybe I should, because we don't have enough answers to that. And so you do feel, if you're working on a project like that, this urgency. You know people who are suffering from these illnesses, and they're waiting for a better answer. And you feel like, okay, I'd better really be as smart and effective and wise as I can, or I'm letting not just myself and my team down, I'm letting out all those people who are waiting. When it came to COVID, that was true at a level that I don't think I'd ever experienced before. I mean, Ron, you remember, but a lot of people have kind of suppressed what it was like in the first half of 2020, with the people dying, with hospitals overwhelmed. The ICUs couldn't accommodate all the people who needed respirators. The trucks were pulling up to the morgue to take care of bodies because there wasn't enough room in their usual facility. And you had this incredible sense that this was really going to be the thing we had most feared for all of our existence, maybe even worse than 1918. And we had to come up with something to fight it off. And the best thing was going to be that vaccine, but vaccines usually fail. And you could throw everything you had at it. And we did with Operation Warp Speed. And still, the chances are it's not going to work. And certainly, the chances are it's going to take much longer than you want it to. The fastest production of a vaccine until then had been 5 years. And this had to be obviously much faster. And yet, it was also a moment of just really feeling so proud and grateful to be part of a community that just rose to the occasion. People dropped everything. They stopped worrying about who was going to get credit. Public and private sectors that sometimes have way too many lawyers getting in the way of working together. The lawyers were banished from the room. And basically, it was possible to build a partnership in days that would normally take years. And it all started to work. And we had that technology of mRNA, which was unproven at the time, never been carried all the way to an approved vaccine, but could be done so much faster because of the nature of the technology. And to watch that go through phase 1 and then phase 2 and then that huge phase 3 trial of 30,000 people, and to have that unblinded on that day in late November and to see 95% efficacy and almost no side effects, I cried pretty hard that night. I was supposed to speak to the assembled group, and I couldn't. I had prayed so hard about this. I'd felt such a sense of everything is riding on this, and then there it was. Wow. But it might not have been that way. God is good. And an awful lot of prayer from a lot of people fitted into that. And yet, we'll probably come to that. A lot of people didn't want it, which is the other side of all this. Being a person who's interested in science, you want the science discoveries to actually benefit people. And if they don't trust you, then there's a different kind of failure.
Yeah, and I wonder if we could turn to that because
Mm.
the irony, the paradox is just so difficult that at the moment of one of the greatest scientific achievements of maybe ever in terms
Mm.
of speed and the record-breaking vaccine development, we also have this great public rejection of the credibility of science and of the integrity of scientists and the safety of
Mm.
vaccines. I mean, how do you reflect on the
Mm.
irony of that? Is there some kind of a weird
Mm.
connection? Can you make any sense of what's going on here?
It's hard. I think it's important to reflect, though, on what the situation was before COVID broke out, because the distrust didn't just suddenly start. This had been building. And the polarization in the United States, but in many other countries as well, between the sort of populist movement and the more liberal perspectives had been also accentuating over the course of many years. And so we got to COVID at a circumstance where many people were already kind of adopting tribal collections of like-minded people that they would listen to. And we had media which had become intensely politicized so that it was hard anymore to find a source that didn't have a bias of one sort or another. And we had politicians who had lost the ability to be civil to each other and turned every issue into a battle to see who could be more outrageous. The outrage Olympics were running hard and fast. And into that, you drop a life-threatening pandemic with all of the fear that that creates. And you have social media providing information, some of which is actually right, but a lot of which, the part that spreads the most rapidly, is the part that makes you fearful and angry and is often not right. And you have within that people who are making money out of spreading false information. So it was a terrible mix for trouble to happen. I got to say, the group that I am most heartbroken about in terms of having the highest level of distrust, the greatest likelihood of turning down the opportunity for the vaccine were white evangelical Christians. I'm a white evangelical Christian. These are my people. And there, I think, Ron, this probably carries back even further. This is the 100th anniversary of the Scopes trial this year, so maybe there's still an echo of that in the view of a lot of conservative Christians that science has got an agenda. Science is trying to undercut faith. That's the way evolution is still perceived, even though the evidence for it is incredibly compelling. And even though many of us see that as a wonderful way to understand the mechanism by which God carried out creation. This is evolutionary creation. But it is still, in many conservative churches, a source of friction, unease. And so when they have a scientist coming forward and saying, here's what you need to do, there's a little voice in the back of the head going, oh, yeah? Are you the same people who told me that Genesis isn't true? And that got in there. By the way, Genesis is true. We have to read it the way that the first readers read it. So all that put together, and plus the fact that sadly, in our current circumstance, white evangelical Christians have had an incredible overtaking of a lot of their principles by politics, much of which is the opposite of what you would read in the Sermon on the Mount, but which has become almost a litmus test for being part of many of these churches. It was a bad mix. It didn't help that we had leadership in the country that was giving very confusing and oftentimes inaccurate information. And then leadership that felt comfortable attacking their own experts. Look what happened to Tony Fauci for being a highly knowledgeable, capable, articulate public health official who became a scapegoat for people who didn't like everything that happened during COVID and wanted somebody to blame. So it was an awful mix. And I didn't see it coming, Ron. I really didn't. I thought when that vaccine results of that trial came forward, we were going to get to 21 and we were going to be okay. And yet 50 million people said in the United States said, not for me. Good, honorable people, many of them followers of Jesus who believe in the truth, the way, the truth, and the life. That's what Jesus is for us. And yet we're sufficiently uncertain, distrustful about what they were hearing that they said no. And 230,000 Americans died unnecessarily between the summer of 21 and the spring of 22. That's a real number. 230,000 gravestones that didn't have to be there because of our culture wars. That breaks my heart.
As I've heard that number again and again, 230,000. I mean, it's just really a huge number. But I'm wondering, you just flagged something about evangelical Christianity that you would like to change, and that's the kind of the recent track record about science and the political aspect to it. What is it about evangelical Christianity today that you find most attractive? I mean, why does it stand out in your mind as being the most authentic expression of the Christian faith?
You know, I grew up an agnostic and then an atheist. I came to Christ in my 20s. And so I had to kind of discover from the Bible, what is it that you are called to be as a follower of Jesus? And I fairly quickly came to the conclusion that what the evangelicals are saying, yeah, that's what the Bible is saying. So you no doubt people will debate what is an evangelical. I always go back to the Bebington quadrilateral, which is sometimes the one that people use. So the four things: a particular regard for the Bible. Okay, it seems like that pretty critical if you're going to be a serious Christian. A focus on the atoning work of Christ on the cross. That's the second one. Really thinking about that and what that meant for me. Um, a third one, which is the belief that we have been given this incredible gift, and you want to be sure that people have received it. So conversionism as sort of a moment of owning your faith, as opposed to somehow having absorbed it as a child that never really quite had it. I mean, I had my conversion moment, so I'm right there with that one. And then activism, a sense that you are called along the lines of what Jesus represented in his own life and what he called us to do, not to be a passive Christian, but to be an active one. The gospel has to be expressed. And that means the Great Commission is part of that. You've got good news. You're supposed to share it. All of that, I think, is what being a Christian should be. And yet, um, I suppose it's more explicitly stated with evangelical Christianity. And I still am comfortable saying I'm an evangelical, even though when I say that word in front of non-believers, I can see the cringe and I can see what's going on inside their head. Oh, you're a hypocrite. Oh, you must have voted for Donald Trump. Oh, you must be one of those that hates anybody and who's not in your church and you think they're going to help.
Hmm. Right. And climate denial and
Oh, yes, right. Let's throw all of that into
all that as well.
yeah, the stereotypes quickly get applied, and a lot of that is simply not true. I know many wonderful churches that are full of evangelical Christians who are doing all those things that I just talked about and not getting trapped up in political lies and attacks and expressions of hate, but they don't get written about so much.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, you've said again and again that you don't see a conflict between your between science in general, your work as a scientist, and your Christian faith. But I'm wondering if, in your view, you would say more than that about do they enrich each other? Does your faith actually enrich your work as a scientist, or does your scientific expertise somehow enrich your religious beliefs or your Christian experience?
Yeah, I'm not one of those who feels that these worldviews have to be put off in a separate part of your brain or a separate part of your daily experience and put a hard firewall between. Not at all. They intersect, they are harmonious, they instruct each other. As a scientist, of course, what do? I study nature, but wait a minute, that's God's creation. I am studying this other book that God gave us, in the words of Francis Bacon. He gave us the Bible, that's a book, but this other book of nature, I can study and read that too. And when I do so, and when there is this opportunity to understand something that wasn't understood before, that doesn't feel like just an intellectual achievement, although it does that. It also feels like a moment of worship. Like I had the chance to kneel at the feet of the Almighty, and the Almighty showed me something that is true and beautiful that I didn't know and nobody knew before, and now we know it. Like, wow, that's so much more of a sense of awe and joy than I would have if I was looking at science and from a purely secular perspective. And likewise, in terms of my faith, when I do stand in awe of the Creator, I think so much about the beauty of creation that God has given us, whether it's that latest picture from the James Webb or it's some incredible insight from the intricacies of the interior of the cell. That is part of my sense of worship. Um, whether it's reading Psalm 8 or Psalm 19 or singing This Is My Father's World, all of that is infused by the not scientific experience that I've had reading that other one of God's books. It just all feels very integrated. That's what I tried to help convey when I wrote that book called The Language of God, which is now almost 20 years ago, and then started the foundation, the BioLogos Foundation, where you have people who are serious Christians Bible-believing Christians who are also really interested in rigorous science, and there's a couple million of them now that are part of that community, and they would all resonate with what I just said. I think some people, maybe who haven't looked at this, are worried that if science gets so clever at discovering causes of things that were previously mysterious, it takes the awe away. Oh, no. It increases the awe by your appreciation of what God has given us.
I love that awe
Yeah.
and joy.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, amazing. So you particularly tried to make the case for evangelical Christians that they shouldn't run away from the theory of evolution. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again, the 100th anniversary of the Scopes trial in
Yeah.
Tennessee. So you've argued that again and again, based based in part on the genome research,
Mm.
and you point to the evidence of uh, shared origins of human beings with other species right in our own bodies, right in our own genomes.
Mm-hmm.
And also pointed to that as a basis for your confidence in the biology of human unity. All
Mm-hmm.
human beings are one species. I wonder if
Mm-hmm.
you'd reflect on when you talk that way among disbelieving, well, in this sense, evangelicals who don't believe in evolution, when you talk that way with them, do you feel them changing their views at all and coming
Mm-hmm.
around to recognize that this is how God can create?
I think a lot have done so. I think this is less, in my view, of an area of extreme tension than it was 20 years ago, but it's still an area of tension, especially maybe for older evangelical Christians who've spent so much time as they were growing up being told that evolution isn't true, that it's something the scientists are trying to hold up, but it's actually coming apart. It doesn't hold up. And and if it were true, then your faith would be in trouble. So you have to resist it. That's so unfortunate that so many Christians were given that message, and some still are in very conservative churches. But I've encountered much more experiences of people who found this sense of relief. Oh, I don't have to be afraid of information that does sound pretty compelling, and I've had to try to push it away because it was making me too uneasy. Oh, you mean I can say that actually the universe is 13.5 billion years old and the earth is 4.5 billion years old, and I haven't suddenly ruined my faith because this actually doesn't conflict with what Genesis tells me about origins. And oh, when I look at the instruction book of our own species and I can see how we're all related to each other, that's what God wanted to tell us too, that we are all of us, Gentiles and Jews, we are all part of God's creation and we are all in need of salvation. And the genome agrees with that. And yeah, we're part of this amazing tapestry of life, all the way to plants and bacteria and other animals. We're related in this way. But there was something special about God's plan to give rise to these big brained creatures that could have a knowledge of good and evil and a desire for a relationship with God Almighty. That was the point. But who are we to say we would have done it differently? And okay, it took a long time, but remember, God's not limited by space and time. It was a blink and of the eye for God Almighty. Then everybody starts to calm down a little bit.
Well, your book features four different
hmm
themes: truth, science, faith, and trust. Now, we're focusing here in this conversation primarily about science and faith,
Mm,
uh, but I'm wondering about the word truth. You
yeah.
lead off the book with a discussion of the meaning of the word truth and the way it's under attack in so many corners today,
hmm
not just politically, but going back for decades. A sense of my truth and your truth and everybody's truth, and Um, but I wonder if you'd reflect on your struggle over the last few years, just to put forward simple empirical claims and have them thrown back as well. That's not true.
Yeah.
That's fake news.
And that's where we are. And it's a source of deep concern for our future. A society that has lost its anchor to objective truth is not going to flourish. That's for sure. And there's even a sense that some of the more cynical amongst us aren't convinced that truth even exists anymore. Maybe there is no such thing. And out of that, you get crazy conspiracies that don't feel the need to measure up what they're claiming with any kind of standard of truth. Or you have the Flat Earth Society, which thousands of people belong to, because they don't look out their window and see evidence that the Earth is round. So, okay, that's my point, and I'm going to stick to it. And you have people in conversations where I, as a scientist, can kind of put forward a fact that is well established by multiple perspectives, by peer reviewed papers and replications, and say, this is what the facts are based on science, and have somebody say, as I often hear now, well, that might be true for you, but it's not true for me. And somehow that's okay, that you're allowed to deny a fact that you don't like. Facts don't care how you feel. Facts just kind of exist outside of us and our biases. But if we're at a point where we think we're in charge of what is true and what's not, we're losing much in the way of a productive future. And I'm really worried about that. Yeah, it's been coming on a while. And in the book, I think I kind of blame the left wing for this with the whole area of postmodernism, which basically kind of said there is no objective truth about anything, except, of course, their claims that there's no objective truth about anything. That one has to be true for them. And that might be fine if you're talking about interpretation of a poem or some aspect of literature. But when you get to science, I'm sorry, I don't know any postmodernist scientists. I don't know how you could go to work and say, there is no objective truth. I'm just going to play around and see what pops out today, and it's probably wrong. No, 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 no. That won't work. But it's kind of infected our society. And it seems like more recently that same attitude, which started on the left, has found its way more on the right side, where everything that you don't like is fake news, which is, I think, more at the moment prominent on the right side of the political spectrum. And that's so odd because it used to be the conservatives who are like very determined that everything had to be rigorously evidence based. And that went out the window, at least in a lot of the discourse that you see now. So this is a serious problem. So I think I had to start the book with a chapter on truth and reminding people that it matters. And reminding people also, and myself, I'm talking to myself here too, that we're all biased. That, maybe Descartes was on a partially good track about objective truth. I think, therefore, I am, but oblivious to the fact that we are all affected. As David Hume said, reason is giving way to the passions all the time. So I adopt in there a bit of what I've learned from reading philosophy by this guy, Van Orman, about the web of belief that we all have, whether we want to admit it or not, a series of significant beliefs that you can diagram as a spider's web. And the ones that are right in the center, they're really important to you. My wife loves me. Jesus died for me. Things on the outside, not so critical. My cat loves me. I don't know. Uh, but if somebody comes at you with information, and it might be really accurate information, and it threatens one of those central nodes, you're not going to be in the mood to be objective and hear it. That's how we are wired. And unfortunately, I think we are less aware and more biased. So, and all of those webs are heavily influenced by what tribal alliance we happen to be involved in. And it takes us to a place where we put trust in information we shouldn't, and we distrust information that was actually good for us and true. All of that because our biases have gotten out of control. That's part of what the book's trying to say. And then calls on the individual, okay, what are you going to do about it? Because I don't think your politicians are going to fix this.
Right. Well, what's amazing to me reading the book is what you have done about it. And I'm thinking of the stories that you tell about what's the organization, the Braver Angels,
Braver angels, yes.
those 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 uh, those conversations. I mean, Christopher Hitchens on the one hand,
Mm,
of course, but I'm thinking particularly of the Braver Angels conversations.
yeah,
And I'm sure you've at times felt frustrated, but at times felt just deeply grateful for the kind of transformation that occurs in when
yes.
human beings come together that way.
It's hard work. It's work that I think a lot of us are a little less likely now to engage in because everything seems so contentious. But it is when you learn a lot about your own position, when you hear somebody with a very different position argue their point, and you really have to listen. That's what Braver Angels has done, is pull all of us who are in these highly contentious spaces into an environment where you need to listen to the other perspective so well that you can say back to them, here's what I heard you say. And they will say, yes, that's what I said. This sounds like marriage counseling, doesn't it? Well, maybe that's what our country needs, is one big marriage counseling between the blues and the reds and other kinds of divided circumstances. And, as you do that, and somebody is being very straightforward and not necessarily pulling any punches, you begin to understand a lot more about what the background is of that person that has led them to that view. And you have to look at your own background and say, okay, I'm probably coming to this with something a little less than complete objectivity. And then along the way, and I've done this many times at Braver Angels, particularly with this guy, Wilk Wilkinson, who started out being my like complete opposite in every view about public health, and who I still think is wrong about a lot of stuff, but we are good friends. And he has helped me modify some of my views by finally understanding where he was coming from. So this is a good thing, but it is not done easily.
And yet it's very, very important as you
Yeah.
suggest go through this book. Um, I mean, I want to quote a few lines from the final
Mm,
pages. You're referring again to truth, science, faith, and trust. And you
mm,
suggest that these four things, quote, are not just sources of relief from a painful period in our country's life. They represent again, truth, science, faith, and trust. They represent the grandest achievements
mm,
and insights of human civilization. They literally hold out the promise of a better life for every person on this planet in material terms, in spiritual terms, and in social and cultural terms.
mhm,
Give up on them would be to give up on humanity's potential. Strong words, Francis, very
mhm.
strong words. And I sense there's a theological conviction underlying them.
Mm. I think so. Yeah, that is strong, but very much the reason I wrote the book. I am deeply troubled about the path that we are on in our society, and that has certainly been true of Christians as well as more secular minded people. And I couldn't stay silent about it. Certainly, the very heartbreaking situation with COVID triggered that even further, but it was already there in my heart and my mind. And as I spent a lot of time in his last 2 years with the Reverend Tim Keller as my most significant spiritual advisor to whom the book is dedicated, he kept saying, well, you got to do something about this. I'm like, oh, Tim, you're the book writer. I'm not really in that space. And he was unwilling to let up. So if people like the book, it's Tim's fault. Uh, if they don't, it's my fault for not living up to Tim's exhortation. But I do think we got to take this seriously. We're in a unique moment here. I don't think that's hyperbole. I don't think that's overstating the circumstance. That we are so polarized. We are so full of grievance and animosity. We are so quick to abandon facts that we don't like. We have lost the ability to evaluate expertise and integrity and humility, the things that we ought to be assessing when we decide about who to trust, because something else dominates. Is that person part of my tribe? If that answer is yes, oh yeah, they're right. Maybe they're not. If they're not part of my tribe, they're wrong. So our whole approach to critical issues that have big effects on ourselves and our families has been overtaken by political, often mean-spirited attitudes that are getting in the way of what we all want to be. And I have to do something to try to sound that alarm. I think that's what the book is, both sounding the alarm in the first 5 chapters and then suggesting to each individual, what can you do about it to be part of the solution?
Yes, and you don't let us off the hook, I'm afraid.
I didn't mean to.
No, I mean, you've obviously heard people complain. Well, a lot of us are just exhausted,
Yeah.
and yeah, you seem to have remarkable energy. I hope you took a day off or so, but came uh, right
Mm,
back into the work that you hold
pretty
so dear.
much.
But yeah, you don't let us off the hook. In fact, the book ends with this pledge that you want us to
Hmm.
read, and not just read, but to commit ourselves. And
Yes.
you ask us to commit ourselves to what you call, quote, honorable goals to reducing animosity, being generous of spirit, and sharing objective truths about the world.
Hmm.
So I wonder if we might end our conversation with your thoughts about this pledge.
Yeah.
Why do you want all of us to step up and put our own integrity on the line?
Well, maybe I'll just quickly read it instead of describing it.
Yeah.
And I am hoping people who read the book will take this seriously. And actually, Braver Angels is hosting a website where you can go and sign that you have actually decided to take the pledge. You can either put your name down if you're comfortable doing that or do so anonymously, but you will know you did it, just as a way of making a statement. This is not just a book to put down and go, oh, well, but to try to actually activate something that I hope more of us can do. So here's what it says. I pledge that from this day forward, I will seek to be part of the solution to our society's widespread divisiveness, which is hurting individuals, families, communities, our nation, and our world. I will actively seek out opportunities to engage in dialogue with those who have different views from mine. By respectful listening, I will strive to understand their perspectives better, to identify our shared deeper values, and to build a bridge across the gap that has divided us. When sifting incoming information, I will seek to be a wise consumer. Taking into account my own biases, I will carefully assess the plausibility of the claim as well as the integrity, competence, and humility of the source in order to decide whether the information is likely to be trustworthy. I will resist the temptation to speak about, write about, or share on social media information that claims to be true but is of uncertain validity. And finally, I will bring a generous spirit to all my interpersonal interactions, refusing to ascribe evil intentions to others simply because of different political or societal beliefs. I will be slow to take offense. Loving my neighbor will be my goal. Sign here. And a lot of people have signed, but more would be better.
Well, more would be better indeed. And yeah, thank you so much for putting that challenge in front of us. You've obviously, having lived through the experiences of the last few years, but the culmination of a lifetime of public service in science and biomedical research. You've recognized what can be achieved when we work together, and
Yeah.
what is lost when we polarize and withdraw from the public space.
Yes.
You've been an extraordinary leader in that respect. I should say that the book ends with a benediction.
Mm.
And for me, I'm afraid, Francis, that was just another echo of the religious spirit that characterizes the whole book. First, a call to a commitment, sign a pledge, do something about it. But then, when you do, a blessing, a benediction.
Yes.
And I don't know if you want to read the whole benediction, but I was going to land on the last bit of it.
I'd love to read the whole thing, but the last bit is the part that always surprises people. This sounds like it's written by St. Francis, and some people call it a Franciscan blessing, but I gather it was really written only about 40 years ago by Benedictine sister Ruth Fox. So here it is. May God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half truths, and superficial relationships, so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, and war, so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and turn their pain into joy. May God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in this world so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. I love that one. May God bless us all with that kind of foolishness, because we're going to need it to pull ourselves out of a bit of a dark place right now.
And then the words, "Come, my friends, and be part of that dream."
Yes.
All right.
That is what I'm hoping this book might be able to help, and maybe we'll have some impact on people listening to our conversation here today, Ron.
I hope so. Well, thank you. Thank you, Francis, for sharing this time with us, for sharing your heart with us, and through all of the challenges, for holding that dream alive. And to all of us, to all of you who have joined us, I want to say, come, my friends, and be part of that dream.
Thank you, Ron. Blessings.